Chapter 3. The Parties Begin. Those two opposites, Jefferson and Hamilton, had ideas that needed balancing. They helped found the country's first political parties. They respected but didn't understand each other. "Mr. Jefferson," wrote Hamilton, "is at the head of a faction decidedly hostile to me and dangerous to the Union, peace, and the happiness of the country." Jefferson replied that Hamilton's ideas flowed from principles adverse to liberty and calculated to undermine and demolish the Republic. Whew! Those are strong words. Dangerous, hostile, adverse to liberty. Did they really mean it? These were men who had built the country together. What was going on? To put it simply, they disagreed about power and who ought to have it. It was that old conflict that had kept everyone arguing when the Constitution was being written. Jefferson and Hamilton were both concerned about liberty and about power. How do you balance the two? How do you guarantee freedom? How do you create a government that can keep order and make sure that government doesn't oppress people? How strong should the government be? Hamilton believed the government should be strong. If the government was to work for all the people, instead of just those with the loudest voices, it needed to be powerful. Hamilton thought that the government should be run by aristocratic leaders, that is, by the prosperous, well-educated citizens who he thought had the time and talents to best run a country. He feared the masses. He said they sometimes acted like sheep, mindlessly following a leader. But Hamilton was also wary of the rich. He thought they often acted out of self-interest. That means they did what was good for themselves. Hamilton knew the government needed checks and balances, so no group could gain control. "Give all power to the many," wrote Hamilton, "and they will oppress the few. Give all power to the few, they will oppress the many. Both, therefore, ought to have power, that each may defend itself against the other." Thomas Jefferson feared powerful government. It was justice and liberty for the individual that concerned him. He saw a strong central government as an enemy of individual liberty. Jefferson had been in Europe and had seen kings in action. He hated monarchies. He feared a king-like president. Jefferson had faith in ordinary people. He thought they could govern themselves, if they were educated. And so he wrote a plan for public schools and colleges. He wanted an amendment to the Constitution that would provide for free education. Because of the differences in ideas, it became clear that political parties were needed. Hamilton's followers formed the Federalist Party. Jefferson's followers were called Democratic Republicans, or sometimes just Republicans. Now this is confusing, so pay attention. The Federalists and Republicans were not like our Democrats and Republicans, but they were the beginnings of today's party system. This is what is confusing. Jefferson's Republican Party was not like today's Republican Party. Actually, it was the parent of today's Democratic Party. The modern Republicans got started later with a president named Abraham Lincoln. Jefferson and Hamilton were both good men, and the ideas of each have been important in our country. On most issues, but not all, Hamilton was a conservative, and Jefferson a liberal. Have you ever heard people argue about conservatism and liberalism? Well, if you haven't, you will. That argument almost tore the country apart in 1800, and it continues today. Which is better, conservatism or liberalism? I think it's the tension and the compromises between those two ideas that have helped make this country great. We need Hamiltonians, we need Jeffersonians, and we need to have them work together. Which is just what has always happened in America. That's not true of many other nations. In some nations, people who speak out against the government are put in jail or even killed. Members of the losing party are thrown out of the country or even killed. That doesn't happen in America. Here, since the time of President George Washington, winners and losers have always agreed to work together. as Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton did. What does that mean for you? Do you have to be afraid of being on the side of the losing party? Can you speak out for an unpopular cause? Of course you can. You're an American.